A single mother went to a job interview, but when the CEO saw her, something inexplicable happened. What was supposed to be just work turned into unexpected love. Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you're watching from. The alarm rang at 5:30 in the morning, as always. Sarah Johnson opened her eyes in the small room she shared with her 8-year-old son, Ethan, in the East Side housing project of Chicago. The smell of yesterday's reheated coffee filled the air as she quietly got up, trying not to wake the boy who was sleeping with a worn-out soccer ball. "Mom," Ethan murmured, still sleepy. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart. Aunt Carol will be here to pick you up for school soon," Sarah whispered, kissing her son's forehead. Her heart tightened, seeing his brown eyes, just like hers, filled with innocent trust that she would always manage everything. In the tiny bathroom, Sarah looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror. At 32, her wavy brown hair was tied in a simple bun, and her calloused hands from years of hard work trembled slightly. Today was different. Today she wouldn't be cleaning offices overnight. Today, she had a job interview that could change everything. The borrowed white blouse from her neighbor Carol was carefully ironed, just like the black skirt she had bought at a thrift store on Michigan Avenue. Around her neck, her grandmother Antonia's small silver cross glimmered discreetly, her only inheritance besides the willpower she had inherited from the woman who raised her alone in Ohio. "Sarah, honey, are you sure you want to try this?" Carol, 67, appeared at the door with Ethan already dressed for school. The neighbor had been her salvation in recent years, taking care of the boy while she worked. "These rich people are different from us." "I need to try, Mrs. Carroll. Ethan deserves more than I can give working only as a cleaner," Sarah replied, adjusting the strap of her worn bag. "And if it works out, I can work during the day and be with him at night." The journey to Michigan Avenue took 2 hours between crowded buses and the subway. Sarah watched as the urban landscape transformed. The simple houses of the outskirts gave way to the mirrored skyscrapers of the financial district. Her stomach churned with each station they passed. The Johnson Corporate Tower, with its 40 floors of glass and steel, loomed impressively against the gray Chicago sky. Sarah stopped on the sidewalk, watching the movement of well-dressed executives entering and exiting the marble lobby. For a moment, she felt like going back home. "You can do this," she murmured to herself, touching the cross. "For Grandma Antonia, for Ethan." The lobby was intimidating. Carrara marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a fountain in the center where coins sparkled at the bottom. Sarah approached the reception desk, where a young blonde woman looked her up and down with a professional smile. "I have an interview scheduled for 9 o'clock with the Human Resources Department," Sarah said, trying to control the nervousness in her voice. "Name? Sarah Johnson." The receptionist typed something on the computer, slightly furrowing her brows. "Please wait here. Someone will come down to get you." Sarah sat in a leather armchair, observing the activity around her. Men in suits discussed business in English. Women in high heels hurried by with briefcases. She felt like a fish out of water. On the 35th floor, Raphael Johnson, at 38 years old, president of Johnson Developments, cancelled his third meeting of the morning. Tall, at 6'1", with slightly graying black hair at the temples and intense green eyes, he felt restless without knowing why. Dressed in a tailored grey suit and navy tie, he paced back and forth in his panoramic office. "Mr. Johnson, the meeting with the Japanese investors." His personal secretary, Jessica, tried to remind him of the appointment. "Reschedule. Reschedule everything," Raphael said, looking out the window at the park across the street, where children played under the watchful eyes of their mothers. A familiar pang of nostalgia crossed his chest as he thought of Lucas, his 15-year-old son who lived with his ex-wife in France. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Johnson, the candidate for the administrative assistant position has arrived." Raphael frowned. He didn't remember authorizing any hiring for that department. Which candidate? A woman named Sarah Johnson, sir. She's been here for 20 minutes. The last name caught his attention. Was it a coincidence? Send her up. When Sarah entered the office, accompanied by HR manager Lisa, Raphael felt something inexplicable. She was different from the women of his social class. There was an authenticity in her gaze, a quiet strength that intrigued him immediately. Mr. Johnson, this is Sarah Johnson, candidate for the administrative assistant position, Lisa introduced. Sarah extended her hand, looking directly into Raphael's eyes. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for the opportunity. Her handshake was firm, her calloused hands contrasting with the softness of her voice. Raphael noticed how she didn't look away, even though she was clearly nervous. Please have a seat, Raphael said, indicating the chair in front of his desk. Tell me about yourself. Sarah took a deep breath. I'm 32 years old, a single mother of an 8-year-old boy. I've worked as a cleaner for 10 years, always at night so I can take care of my son during the day. I completed my GED and am taking a technical course in administration on Saturdays. Why do you want to work here? Raphael asked, intrigued by her straightforward honesty. I need a daytime job to spend more time with my son. And... She hesitated, then continued with determination. I want to grow professionally. I don't want Ethan to grow up seeing his mom only as a cleaner. I want him to know we can be more. Raphael watched as she spoke about her son. There was a fierce love there, a determination that he recognized in himself. And the child's father? Sarah lifted her chin. He's not part of our lives. It's just me and Ethan. For 2 hours, David asked questions that went far beyond a typical interview. He discovered that Sarah had never missed a day of work, that she saved every penny to pay for her technical course, and that she dreamed of giving her son a better life. He also learned that she had lost her parents as a child and was raised by her grandmother, who had passed away 5 years earlier. Sarah, David finally said, the position is yours. Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You won't regret it. When Sarah left, David stood by the window for a long time. There was something about that woman that had touched him deeply. Perhaps the memory of his own humble childhood before his family built their business empire. Or maybe it was the way she spoke about her son, with the same desperate love he felt for Lucas. That night, Sarah arrived home radiant. Ethan ran into her arms, and she lifted him, spinning around the small living room. Mom got a new job, sweetheart. A daytime job, so I can spend more time with you. Really, Mom? Ethan smiled, showing the front tooth that was coming in. Can I show you the goals I learned at school? Every day, Sarah promised, kissing her son's face. That night, for the first time in years, Sarah slept with hope in her heart. On the other side of the city, David also stayed awake for hours, thinking about the strength of that woman and the strange feeling that his life had just taken a completely new direction. The smell of coffee that had filled the office that morning seemed to linger in the air, mixed with the sensation that nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah's first day of work arrived on a rainy Monday in March. She woke up 2 hours earlier than necessary, got ready with the same care as for the interview, and made breakfast for Ethan, who was ecstatic about the news. Mom, now you're going to work just like the mums of my friends at school, Ethan said, chewing on his buttered toast. Can I tell everyone? Of course, sweetheart, Sarah smiled, adjusting her son's school uniform. But remember, Mom will work hard to make you proud, okay? Carol appeared at the door promptly at 7 o'clock. Honey, you look beautiful. You look like a real executive. Sarah had invested part of her savings in a pair of black dress pants and 2 blouses, one white and one navy. Nothing too fancy, but presentable. The low-heeled shoes, bought on sale, still pinched her feet that were used to sneakers. Arriving at Johnson Enterprises was different this time. Sarah was no longer a nervous candidate, but an employee. At the reception, The same young blonde greeted her with a warmer smile. "Sarah Johnson, I'm Julia from reception. Welcome to the company." "Thank you, Julia. I'm a little nervous," Sarah confessed. "That's normal. Today you'll meet your immediate supervisor, Ms. Patricia Smith. She coordinates the entire administrative department." The elevator went up to the 22nd floor, where the administrative sector was located. The environment was bustling, phones ringing, printers working, work conversations echoing between the cubicles. Sarah was led to a room where a woman in her mid-40s, with short hair and glasses, awaited her. "Sarah!" Finally, Patricia Smith stood up, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia, your supervisor. I've heard great things about you." "Good morning, Ms. Patricia. I'm excited to start. Let's check out your workstation and your responsibilities." Patricia led her across the floor. "You'll be responsible for organizing documents, answering some phones, making basic reports, and providing general support to the department. It's a lot of responsibility, but I'm sure you'll do well." Sarah's desk was in a cubicle near the window, where part of the city could be seen. It was simple: a computer, a phone, trays for documents, and a small plant that the previous occupant had left. "This is Emily." Patricia introduced a woman in her 30s with curly hair and a friendly smile. "She works in the next cubicle and will help you with any initial questions." "Hi, Sarah! Welcome aboard!" Emily seemed genuinely happy. "If you need anything, just ask. We're all partners here." The first hours were a whirlwind of information. Computer systems, company protocols, department locations, and colleagues' names. Sarah absorbed everything with determination, jotting down every detail in a notebook she had brought from home. Around 10 o'clock, her phone rang. "Administrative Department, Sarah speaking." "Sarah, this is Jessica, Mr. Johnson's secretary. He needs some urgent documents. Could you come up to the 35th floor? Sarah's heart raced. "Of course. What documents?" "The monthly reports from the last 6 months. Patricia knows where they are." Sarah grabbed the folder with Patricia and headed for the elevator. During the ride up, she tried to calm her nerves. "It was just work," she repeated to herself. The 35th floor was a world apart. Thick carpets, artwork on the walls, fine wooden furniture. Jessica, an elegant woman in her 50s, greeted her with professional courtesy. "Come in. Mr. Johnson is waiting." David was on the phone when Sarah entered, gesturing for her to sit down. She discreetly observed the office. A whole wall of glass with a panoramic view of the city, shelves filled with books and trophies, a massive mahogany desk, and surprisingly, some photos of a child, probably his son. "Sorry for the delay," David said, ending the call. "How was your first morning?" "Good, Mr. Johnson. I'm still getting used to it, but I really like the environment." David noticed how she spoke sincerely, without exaggeration or flattery. "Great. I need you to organize these reports in chronological order. Please prepare an executive summary of 2 pages. It's urgent." Sarah grabbed the documents, flipping through them quickly. It was more complex than she had imagined, but not impossible. "When do you need it by?" "By the end of the day." "I'll do my best." As Sarah left, David was deep in thought. There was something about her demeanor, determined yet not arrogant, that intrigued him. In the 2 years since his divorce, he had only dated women from his social class, often with ulterior motives or financial interests. Back on his floor, Sarah dove into the work. The numbers didn't lie. The company was facing financial turbulence. There were inconsistencies in the reports that caught her attention, figures that didn't add up, departments with excessive spending without justification. "Do you need help?" Emily asked, seeing Sarah focused. "I'm trying to understand these numbers. Some data seems off." Emily approached, examining the documents. Her expression changed subtly. "Sarah, a piece of advice. Sometimes it's better not to ask too many questions around here. You understand?" Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "Nothing major." Emily forced a smile. "It's just that you're new, still getting to know how things work here." At 5 in the evening, Sarah returned to the 35th floor with the report ready. David read it carefully, impressed by the organization and clarity of the text. "Excellent work," he said. "For someone on their first day, this is impressive." "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. May I make an observation?" David raised his eyebrows. "Go ahead. I noticed some inconsistencies in the numbers. It might be my mistake for still learning, but what kind of inconsistencies?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Some departments have very high expenses without clear justification. And there are transfers to accounts I couldn't identify." David leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with renewed interest. "And what do you suggest?" "That someone with more experience reviews these points. I might be wrong, but—" "You're not wrong," David said quietly. "Thank you very much for bringing this to my attention." That night, Sarah arrived home exhausted but fulfilled. Ethan was waiting for her with Carol, eager to hear about her first day. "So, Mom, how was it working with the wealthy?" Sarah laughed, hugging her son. "They were just people, Ethan, people with problems and qualities like everyone else." "And is the boss nice?" Sarah hesitated. "He seems fair and very smart." Carol observed Sarah's expression with the knowing gaze of someone who had raised 5 children. "Be careful, dear. A rich man and a poor woman rarely end well." "Come on, Carol. It's nothing like that. It's just work." But that night, as Ethan slept beside her, Sarah found herself thinking about David's green eyes and the sadness she had seen in them when he looked at pictures of his son. There was something about that man that piqued her curiosity. Not the money or power, but a loneliness she recognized. On the other side of the city, David worked late, analyzing the points Sarah had raised. She was right. Something was wrong in his own company. And for the first time in years, someone had had the courage to speak the truth without personal interest. As the rain drummed against the office windows, David wondered if that determined woman might be exactly what his life and his company needed. 2 weeks later, Sarah had fully adapted to the routine at Johnson Enterprises. She arrived 15 minutes early every day, organized her desk with military precision, and tackled each task with quiet determination. Her colleagues began to respect her for her dedication, but they also noticed something more, an unusual ability to perceive details that others overlooked. "Sarah, you have an impressive clinical eye," Emily commented during the coffee break. They were in the small break room on the 22nd floor, where an old machine served watered-down coffee and simple cookies. "Yesterday, you found that error in the accounting report that no one else had seen." "It's a habit," Sarah replied, stirring sugar into her coffee. "When you clean offices for years, you learn to notice when something is out of place." What Sarah didn't say was that there was something deeper in her intuition. Growing up in a low-income neighborhood, being a single mother, surviving with limited resources, all of this had sharpened her ability to read people and situations. Lately, she felt that something was not right in the company. On Thursday of her 3rd week, Sarah was organizing documents when she heard raised voices coming from the conference room. The door was ajar, and she recognized David's voice mixed with another authoritative female voice. "David, you're being naive." The woman's voice was sharp. "The company is bleeding money, and you're just playing benevolent president." "Jessica, I'm not going to lay off 300 people just because you want to impress the Japanese," David replied, visibly irritated. Sarah moved closer discreetly, pretending to organize the files near the room. Through the crack in the door, she saw an elegant woman around 35, with perfectly styled blonde hair, wearing a beige suit that cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. She gestured dramatically, clearly frustrated. "You don't understand." Jessica slammed her hand on the table. "The board is losing patience. Just because your father made you president doesn't mean you're untouchable." David stood up, walking over to the window. "Jessica, you're my sister. I expected you to support me, not conspire against me. It's not conspiracy, it's reality. If you don't make the tough decisions, someone will have to make them for you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. That conversation sounded like a veiled threat. She tried to back away discreetly, but stumbled over a stack of papers, making noise. "Who's there?" Jessica opened the door abruptly, finding Sarah with documents scattered on the floor. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just organizing the files," Sarah said, bending down to pick up the papers. Jessica looked at her with calculating eyes. "You're new here." "Yes, ma'am. Sarah Johnson, from the administrative department." "Johnson?" Jessica raised an eyebrow, glancing at David, who had approached. "How interesting." David helped Sarah gather the documents. "Sarah, you can leave that for later. Go have lunch." "Thank you, Mr. Johnson." Sarah quickly stepped away, but not before catching the predatory look that Jessica shot her. During lunch, Sarah couldn't focus on the simple sandwich she had brought from home. She ate in the small plaza in front of the building, watching the children play under the watchful eyes of their mothers. It was her daily moment of peace, when she would call Ethan to see how his day at school was going. "Hi, Mummy's little star." "Mom, today I scored 2 goals at recess." Her son's excited voice always brightened her day. "2 goals? My little champ is getting famous. Aunt Carol said I can stay up until you get home today. Can I?" Sarah smiled. "Of course. Mummy will be home by 6:30. I love you so much." "I love you too, Mom. Very, very much." After lunch, Sarah returned to work with renewed determination. Around 3 o'clock, Patricia called her into her office. "Sarah, I need you to go to the storage room in the basement. There are some old documents that Mr. Johnson requested." Patricia handed her a list with file codes. "These are documents from 5 years ago, back when there were changes in the management. The basement of Johnson Enterprises was a forgotten world, dimly lit corridors, tall shelves filled with dusty boxes, and a smell of old paper that permeated everything." Sarah quickly found the requested files, but her curiosity led her to explore a bit further. That's when she stumbled upon a box marked Confidential Management 2019-2020. Inside were documents that made her heart race, meeting minutes discussing the removal of David from the presidency, feasibility studies for selling the company, and, more shockingly, detailed reports on David's personal life, including information about his divorce and the loss of custody of his son. Sarah quickly snapped photos of some documents with her old phone, her hands trembling. This was not just family disloyalty. It was an elaborate conspiracy. "What are you doing here?" Sarah turned, startled. Emily was at the entrance of the file room, with an expression she had never seen before, cold and calculating. "Patricia sent me to get some documents." Sarah showed the list, trying to hide her nervousness. Emily approached, observing the open box. "And why are you digging through confidential files?" "A chick was just curious. I'm sorry." Emily closed the box with a sharp movement. "Sarah, you seem like a good person, but here you need to learn to focus only on your work. Curiosity can be dangerous." Emily's tone was no longer friendly. It was a clear warning. Back on her floor, Sarah tried to work normally, but she was visibly shaken. Around 5 o'clock, her phone rang. "Sarah, this is Jessica. Mr. Johnson would like to speak with you. Can you come up?" The journey to the 35th floor had never felt so long. Sarah knocked on the office door with sweaty hands. "Come in," David said, not looking up from the documents on his desk. When he finally looked at her, Sarah noticed lines of tension on his face that hadn't been there before. His green eyes looked tired, almost defeated. "Have a seat, Sarah. We need to talk." Sarah sat on the edge of the chair, bracing herself for the worst. "Someone told me you were snooping through confidential files today," David said directly. Sarah took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. "Mr. Johnson, I can explain." "No need to explain. You need to decide." David leaned back in his chair. "You can pretend you didn't see anything, keep doing your job, and continue receiving your salary. or you can tell me what you discovered and get yourself into a very dangerous situation." Sarah looked directly into his eyes. "You already know what I found." "I do, but I want to hear it from you. Your sister is planning to remove you from the presidency. There are detailed documents about it, studies to sell the company. They even investigated your personal life." David nodded slowly. "And what do you intend to do with this information?" Sarah stood up, walking to the window where she could see the plaza where she had lunch every day. "Mr. Johnson, I come from the outskirts. I know what injustice is, and I can recognize when someone is being betrayed by those who should protect them. And," she turned to face him, "I choose to stand by your side, even if it's dangerous." David studied her face for a long moment. There was a determination there that he rarely saw, not even in seasoned executives. "Sarah, if you help me, you could lose much more than your job. These people don't play around." "Mr. Johnson," Sarah said firmly, "I've already lost almost everything in life. What remains is my dignity and my word is that you can count on me." At that moment, as the sun set over Chicago and the city lights began to flicker on, David Johnson knew he had found something rare in the business world, a true ally. And Sarah knew that her life had just taken a turn she had never imagined possible. The weekend passed slowly for Sarah. Ethan noticed that his mum seemed more thoughtful than usual, especially during Sunday lunch at Carol's house, when the whole neighborhood gathered in the small backyard for the traditional neighborhood barbecue. "Mum, are you okay?" Ethan asked, tugging at her shirt while they watched the men discussing soccer around the makeshift grill. Sarah smiled, stroking her son's hair. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just thinking about work." "Is the new job hard?" "Sometimes," Sarah replied honestly. "But Mommy will manage, just like she always has." Carol approached with 2 plates of food. "Sarah, you've seemed worried since Thursday. Do you want to talk?" Sarah hesitated. How could she explain to her neighbor that she had gotten caught up in a corporate conspiracy? "Carol, have you ever had to choose between what's right and what's safe?" The older woman laughed, sitting down next to her on the wooden bench. "Honey, my life, the entire choice was like this. When I reported my neighbor's violent husband, when I hid money from my ex-husband to ensure my children's sustenance, life for us poor folks is full of these decisions. And how did you know you were doing the right thing? I looked at my children and asked, what kind of mother do I want them to remember I was? Brave or cowardly?" Carol observed Ethan running after a ball with the other kids. "That boy needs a mother who teaches that character is worth more than safety." On Monday, Sarah arrived at work with renewed determination. David had scheduled a meeting for 9 o'clock, and she knew it would be crucial. The 35th floor felt different that morning. Jessica seemed tense, and there was an unusual movement of well-dressed executives circulating the halls. "You can go in," Jessica said when Sarah arrived. "Mr. Johnson is waiting." David was not alone. A man in his 60s, with completely white hair and an elegant posture, was sitting in a leather armchair. His clothes were impeccable, but there was something paternal in his blue eyes. "Sarah, this is Mr. Johnson, my father and the founder of the company," David introduced. Sarah extended her hand respectfully. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Johnson." Mr. Johnson studied her with interest. "So you are the young woman who discovered the problems in our house." "Sir, Sarah began, but he interrupted her with a gentle gesture. "Relax, my dear. I'm here to thank you, not to reprimand you." Mr. Johnson stood up, walking to the window. "You know, Sarah, I built this company 40 years ago. I started selling land door to door in the countryside. Today, we have 300 employees, most of whom have families to support." Sarah listened in silence, feeling the weight of responsibility. "My daughter Jessica has always been ambitious," Mr. Johnson continued. "But ambition without character is dangerous, and you, a new employee, had the courage that experienced executives did not have. David stood up, handing a folder to Sarah. "I need you to help me gather more evidence, but I want you to understand the risks." Sarah opened the folder. Inside were documents showing suspicious financial transfers, internal emails discussing the Success operation, and even a preliminary contract with a Japanese group for the company's purchase at a price well below market value. "My God," Sarah murmured, analyzing the numbers. "They want to sell for half the real value?" "Exactly," David said. "And Jessica would receive a substantial commission as a transition consultant." Mr. Johnson sighed heavily. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Jessica is my daughter and I love her, but I cannot allow her to destroy the legacy of a lifetime." Sarah closed the folder, looking directly at the two men. "What do you need me to do?" "We want you to continue working normally, but observing everything," David explained. "Document conversations, take photos of documents if necessary, note the times of suspicious meetings. Basically, you want me to be a spy." "Yes," David replied bluntly. "And it's dangerous. If they find out, you could lose more than your job." Sarah thought of Ethan, the private school she dreamed of paying for him, the house she planned to buy. Then she thought of Carol and her words about character. "I accept," she said firmly, "but I have a few conditions." David raised his eyebrows, surprised. "What are they?" "First, if something happens to me, I want guarantees that my son will be protected. Second, when this is all over, regardless of the outcome, I want a letter of recommendation. And third, I want to learn. If I'm going to risk myself for this company, I want to truly understand how it works." Mr. Johnson smiled for the first time. "David, this young woman has more strategic vision than half of our board." "I accept your conditions," David said. "But Sarah, once we start this, there's no turning back." "Are you sure?" Sarah remembered her grandmother Antonia, who faced life alone in the countryside, raising her orphaned granddaughter without ever lowering her head. "I am sure." In the following weeks, Sarah developed a double routine. During the day, she performed her normal duties with even more efficiency, gaining the trust of colleagues and superiors. At night, she meticulously organized all the information collected. She discovered that Emily was indeed spying for Jessica, detailing her activities. She also found out that Patricia, her direct supervisor, was being pressured to find reasons to fire her. "Sarah is being very curious," she overheard Emily comment on the phone during a conversation she clearly thought was private. "Yes, Ms. Jessica. She has asked many questions about the old files." Sarah also noticed patterns in Jessica's meetings. Every Tuesday, she met with 3 board members at a nearby Japanese restaurant. On Thursdays, she received long calls from an international number that Sarah discovered was from Tokyo. The most disturbing information came when Sarah accidentally found a document in the legal department's printer. It was a psychological report on David, suggesting he was emotionally unstable due to his divorce and separation from his son, and therefore unsuitable to lead a large corporation. That night, Sarah arrived home particularly shaken. Ethan was doing homework at the small kitchen table, focused on an essay about my hero. "What are you writing about, sweetheart?" "About you, Mom," Ethan replied naturally. "The teacher asked us to write about our hero, and mine is you." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "Why?" "Because you never give up, even when it's hard, and because you always do what's right, even when it's scary." And at that moment, Sarah knew she was on the right path, not just for David or the company, but for the example she wanted to set for her son. The next day, she called an urgent meeting with David. When she entered his office at 6 in the evening, she found him visibly shaken, looking at a photo of his teenage son. "Mr. Johnson, we need to speed things up," Sarah said directly. "They are preparing something big for next week." David looked up. "What did you find out?" Sarah handed him a USB drive. Everything is here. Recorded conversations, photographed documents, a timeline of meetings. They plan to call an extraordinary board meeting for Friday. David connected. He plugged the USB drive into the computer, quickly analyzing the contents. His expression shifted from despair to determination. "Sarah," he said, "you just saved not only my career, but 300 families." Sarah smiled, thinking of Ethan and his essay. "Mr. Johnson, I just did what my grandmother taught me. Always choose the right side, even if it's the hardest." In that moment, with the city of Chicago lighting up outside, they both knew that the real battle was just beginning. Friday dawned cloudy in Chicago, with that heavy air that precedes autumn storms. Sarah arrived at the office earlier than usual, at 7 in the morning, and noticed unusual activity in the building. Men in dark suits were circulating the halls with serious expressions, and she recognized some faces from the photos she had seen in reports. Members of the board of directors. "Good morning, Sarah," greeted Julia from reception, but her smile seemed forced. "It's going to be a busy day around here." "Important meeting?" Sarah asked casually. "Extraordinary board meeting. They say they will discuss significant changes in the company." Sarah went up to her floor with her heart racing. The plan was in motion, just as expected. Patricia was waiting for her with a strange expression. "Sarah, today you'll be responsible for serving coffee and water during the board meeting. It's a big responsibility. You'll be in the presence of the company's top executives. Of course, Ms. Smith. Where will the meeting be?" "In the Grand Hall, 38th floor. Dress appropriately and remember, you're just there to serve. Don't ask questions, don't interrupt, just listen if anyone needs anything." Sarah nodded, but inside a smile was forming. Being in the meeting would be perfect for her purposes. At 9 o'clock, Sarah ascended to the 38th floor wearing her best white blouse and carrying a tray with porcelain cups. The Grand Hall was impressive, an oval mahogany table for 20 people, paintings by renowned American artists on the walls, and a spectacular view of the city. The board members were already arriving. Sarah recognized Dr. Robert Yamamoto, a Japanese-American businessman of about 65 years who had always been close to the Johnson family. There was also Dr. Helena Carter, a lawyer specializing in mergers and acquisitions, and 5 other executives she had seen in the photos. Jessica entered the hall like a queen, wearing a pristine red suit and carrying an Italian leather briefcase. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant bun, and she greeted everyone with calculated smiles. "Good morning, board members," Jessica said, taking the head of the table. "Thank you all for attending this extraordinary meeting." David entered a few minutes later, visibly tense. Sarah noticed how he avoided his sister's gaze, greeting the board members with professional but distant courtesy. "Where's Dad?" David asked, noticing the absence of the founder. "Dad decided not to attend this meeting," Jessica replied coldly. "He said he prefers that the children solve their own problems." Sarah discreetly served coffee, keeping her ears attentive to every word. Meanwhile, she discreetly activated the recorder on her phone that she had hidden in her apron pocket. "Well," Jessica began, "we all know why we're here. Johnson Enterprises is going through a delicate moment. Our profits fell 15% last quarter. We have stalled projects, and frankly, our current leadership cannot reverse the situation." Dr. Yamamoto spoke up. "Jessica, David has always shown competence. Perhaps it's premature." "Robert," Jessica interrupted, "you've known David since childhood, and that clouds your judgment. Look at these numbers." She distributed reports around the table. Questionable administrative decisions, excessive employee benefits spending, refusal to modernize processes. David remained calm. "Jessica, those excessive expenses are investments in people, and the processes are being gradually modernized to avoid traumatizing the employees." "Exactly the problem." Jessica slammed her hand on the table. "You prioritize feelings over results. A company is not an NGO, David." Sarah observed the expressions of the board members. Some seemed convinced by Jessica's arguments, while others showed discomfort with the situation. Dr. Helena Carter opened an elegant folder. I received a concrete proposal from the Nakamura Group. They offer to buy 70% of the company for a price I consider interesting, keeping 30% with the Johnson family. How much? David asked directly. $200 million, Jessica replied quickly. Sarah almost dropped the cup she was serving. From the documents she had seen, the company was worth at least $400 million. It was exactly the robbery David had predicted. $200 million? David stood up. Jessica, our company is worth double that. You want to force me to accept a ridiculous offer. It's the best offer we have, Jessica replied coldly. And frankly, the way things are going, it may be the only one. Dr. Yamamoto frowned. That amount seems low. Robert, Dr. Helena intervened. The real estate market is in crisis. It's better to secure a certain amount today than risk losing everything tomorrow. Sarah continued serving, but was recording every word. The tension in the room was palpable. I want to propose a vote, Jessica said. A motion of no confidence in the current presidency, followed by authorization to negotiate the partial sale of the company. That's a coup, David said quietly. That's business, Jessica retorted. At that moment the door opened, and Mr. Johnson entered the hall. Everyone stood up respectfully. The patriarch walked slowly, supported by an elegant cane, but his blue eyes shone with determination. Dad? Jessica looked visibly surprised. I thought that I would let you destroy what I built over 40 years. Mr. Johnson approached the head of the table. Everyone sit down. Sarah took advantage of the confusion to position herself strategically behind a column where she could see and hear everything. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Yamamoto stood up. It's good to see you. We were discussing... I know exactly what you were discussing, Mr. Johnson interrupted him, and I also know who's behind this farce. Jessica paled. Dad, I don't understand. Jessica, Mr. Johnson's voice was sad but firm. Do you think I got where I am by being naive? I know about the meetings at the Japanese restaurant. I know about the consulting fee you would receive. I know everything. The silence in the room was deafening. How? Jessica stammered. Mr. Johnson smiled ironically. I have eyes and ears everywhere, my daughter, including a very dedicated employee who had the courage to come to me. All eyes turned to Sarah, who felt the blood freeze in her veins. She had been discovered. Sarah Johnson, Mr. Johnson continued, please come here. Sarah approached the table with trembling legs. Jessica looked at her with pure hatred. This young woman, said Mr. Johnson, has only been working here for a month, and in that month she has shown more loyalty to our family than people we have known for years. Emily, who had quietly entered the room, widened her eyes as she realized what was happening. Dad, David spoke up, let me explain. You don't need to explain anything, son. I know you discovered the conspiracy and that Sarah helped you gather evidence. Mr. Johnson turned directly to Jessica. My daughter, you have two options. Voluntarily resign from all positions in the company and keep your shares as a minority shareholder, or face a lawsuit for attempted fraud and conspiracy. Jessica stood up abruptly. You can't do this to me. I can, and I will, Mr. Johnson replied calmly. And about the Japanese offer, $200 million for a company worth $400. What kind of father do you think I am? Dr. Yamamoto cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Johnson, perhaps we should reconsider the values. Roberto, Mr. Johnson smiled, you have always been honest with me. That's why I'm giving you a chance to explain how you came to support this farce. The meeting continued for 2 more tense hours. In the end, Jessica resigned in humiliation. 3 advisors involved in the conspiracy were dismissed, and David was officially confirmed as president with expanded powers. When everyone left, Sarah stayed in the room tidying up the cups, trying to process what had happened. "Sarah," David approached, "I don't know how to thank you. I just did what I thought was right, Mr. Johnson." Mr. Johnson approached as well. "Sarah, starting today, you will be promoted to executive assistant to the presidency. Salary increase, full health plan, and a scholarship to finish your college degree." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "Mr. Johnson, I don't know what to say." "Say you accept," David smiled, "and that you're ready to help rebuild this company the right way." That afternoon, when Sarah got home, Ethan ran into her arms as always. "Mom, how was work today?" Sarah hugged him tightly, feeling the sweet scent of his hair. "Today, son, Mommy discovered that doing the right thing always pays off, even when it's scary." "You're brave, Mom," Ethan said simply. And that night, for the first time in a long time, Sarah slept peacefully, knowing she had honored her grandmother Antonia's memory and set an example of character that Ethan would remember forever. 2 months after the meeting that changed everything, Sarah was gradually getting used to her new position. The office on the 36th floor was small, but had a view of the city, furnished with a light wood desk, a modern computer, and a small shelf that she had decorated with a picture of Ethan and some plants. It was her first office of her own in her life. "Good morning, Sarah," Jessica greeted as she passed through the door. "Mr. Johnson wants to speak with you in 10 minutes. Sarah saved the report she was typing and headed to the upper floor. In recent months, these morning meetings had become routine. David had discovered that she had a natural ability to organize complex information and an impressive intuition for detecting problems before they became crises. "Come in, Sarah," David said, without looking up from a pile of contracts. He looked tired, with more pronounced dark circles than usual. "I need you to analyze these contracts for the Oakwood project. Something doesn't add up." Sarah took the documents, flipping through them quickly. In a few minutes, her expression changed. "Mr. Johnson, these prices are 30% above the market. And look here," she pointed to a specific clause. "This materials company doesn't exist in the business registration number." David finally lifted his head, impressed. "How do you know that?" "Basic check I learned in my technical course, and—" She hesitated. "I grew up in the projects, Mr. Johnson. I know when someone is trying to pull a fast one." David smiled for the first time that day. "Keep investigating, and Sarah, you can call me David when we're alone. This formality is getting strange." Sarah blushed slightly. "I still feel uncomfortable with that." "Mr. David?" "Better," he laughed. "Now, I need you to accompany me to a meeting with the construction company. I want your opinion on them." 2 hours later, Sarah was sitting in a luxurious meeting room in downtown Chicago, watching 3 executives from the Stone Strong Construction Company present justifications for the inflated prices. David was conducting the meeting politely, but she could sense the tension in his posture. "Gentlemen," said the sales director, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a flashy Rolex, "the prices reflect the high quality of the materials. You can't compare our company to any neighborhood contractor." Sarah took notes silently, but her eyes caught details that the men thought were imperceptible. The nervousness of the financial manager, the way the sales director avoided direct eye contact, small contradictions in the information presented. "And what about the deadlines?" David asked. "We guarantee delivery in 8 months, replied the technical director. Sarah discreetly wrote on a piece of paper and passed it to David. "Impossible. A project of this scale needs at least 12 months. "They are lying." David read the note and changed his approach. "Gentlemen, I will be direct. We suspect there are irregularities in this proposal. Do you want to review the numbers, or should I hire an independent auditor?" The sales director became visibly nervous. "Mr. Johnson, I don't understand the insinuation." "Then let's clarify." David stood up. "Sarah, tell the gentleman what you discovered." Sarah took a deep breath. It was the first time she was actively participating in a negotiation of this level. Gentlemen, the materials supplier listed in the proposal does not exist. The prices are 30% above the market price index, and the 8-month deadline is physically impossible for a project of this magnitude. The silence in the room was awkward. The three men exchanged glances, clearly caught off guard. "How do you explain this?" David asked coldly. After 15 minutes of flimsy excuses, the construction company withdrew the proposal for review. As they left, David and Sarah descended to the parking lot in silence. "Sarah," David finally said, "you just saved me at least $2 million. I just did my job." "No," David stopped next to the car, a discreet black BMW. "You did much more than that. Jessica has worked with me for 15 years and wouldn't have detected these irregularities." Sarah felt embarrassed by the compliment. "Can I ask you something personal?" David hesitated, then nodded. "Have you always been suspicious? Or did life teach you to be?" David remained silent for a long moment, watching the street's activity. "My ex-wife taught me that people can hide their true intentions very well, especially when money is involved." "And your son?" David's expression hardened. "Lucas lives with her in Paris. She uses our son as emotional leverage whenever she wants something." Sarah felt a pang in her chest. "That must be very difficult." "It is." David opened the car door. "But I don't want to talk about it. Let's go back to the office." During the drive, Sarah noticed how David drove with excessive caution, always respecting the speed limits. It was different from the image she had of wealthy businessmen. "Can I ask one more question?" "Sure." "Why do you trust me? I mean, I'm a cleaner who became an assistant just a few months ago." David thought for a moment. "Because you have no ulterior motives and because," he hesitated, "you remind me that there are genuine people in the world." Back at the office, Sarah found a surprise on her desk. Flowers and a card. She opened it nervously. "To the woman who saved our family. With love, Mr. Johnson." Jessica appeared smiling. "Mr. Johnson had them delivered this morning. He said today marks exactly 2 months since you started working here." Sarah was touched. No one had ever remembered important dates related to her work. Around 5 in the afternoon, her phone rang. It was Lucas's school. "Ms. Johnson, this is Principal Lisa. Is everything all right?" Sarah's heart raced. "Is something wrong with Lucas?" "Don't worry, he's fine. But we need to discuss a situation. A man was here today asking about your son." Sarah felt the world spin. "What man?" "He said he was a journalist doing a piece on working mothers. He asked many specific questions about you two." Sarah hung up the phone with trembling hands. She immediately went up to David's office. "Something happened," she said, entering without knocking. David looked at her expression and immediately became alert. "What is it?" Sarah told him about the call from the school. David looked visibly concerned. "Sarah, this could be a consequence of the situation with Jessica. She didn't take being removed from the company well." "My son has nothing to do with this." "I know." David stood up, walking towards her. "We're going to pick up Lucas now, and tomorrow I'll hire personal security for you." "Security? That's an overreaction." "Sarah," David looked at her seriously, "you've crossed paths with very powerful people. Jessica has connections that go beyond the company. We can't take risks." An hour later, Sarah and David were at Lucas's school. The principal, a middle-aged woman with a maternal expression, greeted them with concern. "The man seemed to know specific details about the family," the principal explained. "He knew you worked at Johnson Enterprises and was aware of your recent job change." Lucas came running, throwing himself into his mother's arms. "Mom, why did you come early?" Sarah hugged him tightly, trying to hide her worry. "I just wanted to see you, sweetheart." Lucas noticed David and greeted him politely. "Hi, Uncle." David smiled, bending down to be at the child's level. "Hi, Lucas. Your mom talks a lot about you." Is it true that you're my mom's boss? Yes, I am. Lucas studied him seriously. Are you nice to her? David genuinely laughed. I try to be. Your mum is very important to me, to the company. That night, Sarah put Lucas to bed early and stayed in the small living room, looking out the apartment window. The housing project seemed different now. Every shadow could hide a threat. Her cell phone rang. It was David. How are you two? Fine, Lucas is asleep. Sarah, I've made a decision. I want you to move to a safer apartment. The company will pay. I can't accept that. It's not a favor, it's a necessity, and it's non-negotiable. Sarah fell silent, torn between pride and concern for Lucas. Sarah, I'm here. It's just that I've fought my whole life to be independent, and you are. But independence doesn't mean stubbornness. Accepting help when necessary is also strength. That night, Sarah looked at Lucas sleeping beside her and made a decision. For his safety, she would accept the help. But she promised herself that one day she would repay every cent. On the other side of the city, David also stayed awake, thinking about the courage of that woman and how her presence was changing not only his company, but something much deeper within him. The apartment in Lincoln Park was a different world for Sarah and Lucas. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a modern kitchen, and a small service area overlooking a park. Lucas ran through the empty rooms on their first visit, euphoric with so much space. "Mom, look! My room has a big window!" he shouted from the window, waving to the children playing in the park across the street. Sarah watched everything with a mix of gratitude and discomfort. The apartment was simple by David's standards, but luxurious by hers. Basic, but new furniture, appliances working perfectly, and most importantly, 24-hour security. "Are you sure everything is okay?" David asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "It's beautiful," Sarah replied honestly. "It's just that I feel indebted." "Sarah," David approached her, "after everything that you did it for the company, for my family, and I'm the one who's in doubt." Carol arrived at that moment, carrying 2 bags of vegetables and with the expression of someone inspecting enemy territory. "So this is where you guys are going to live," she said, observing every detail. "It's nice, but far from our community." "Aunt Carol," Sarah hugged her, "it's just temporary, and you can come here whenever you want." The neighbor watched David with barely concealed curiosity. "Are you Sarah's boss?" "I am," David replied respectfully. "You must be Carol. Sarah talks a lot about you." "I hope it's good things," Carol said, maintaining a formal tone. "And I hope you treat my girl with respect." Sarah blushed. "Aunt Carol? What? I'm just making it clear that she has family who takes care of her." David smiled, genuinely touched by the older woman's protection. "You don't need to worry. Sarah is one of the most important people in my professional life." Carol noticed the small pause and raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. 2 weeks later, Sarah was completely adapted to the new routine. The commute to work was shorter. Ethan loved the new school near the apartment, and she finally managed to sleep without worrying about safety. "Sarah," David said one Thursday morning, "I need you to accompany me on a business trip, Chicago to Springfield, meeting with investors for a new project." "Trip?" Sarah hesitated. "And Ethan?" "Just one day. We leave in the morning and come back at night, and—" David hesitated. "I want your opinion on the investors. You have a special talent for reading people." Sarah agreed but spent the entire morning nervous. It was the first time she would travel for work, the first time she would be alone with David for so many hours. The drive was revealing. David drove calmly along the highway, listening to classical music softly. Sarah watched the rural landscape of Illinois, so different from the big city. "Can I ask about your childhood?" Sarah broke the silence. David smiled. "Sure, but it wasn't very glamorous. My father started selling land in the countryside. We lived in a simple house in Springfield. Camilla and I shared a room." "Were you close?" "We were." David's voice became melancholic. Camilla was always ambitious, but when we were kids, that ambition was innocent. She wanted to be the top of the class, the best at everything. What changed? David was silent for a moment. Money. When the company grew, when we started to have possessions, Camilla changed, as if it was never enough. And you? I always knew that money doesn't change who you are inside. David looked at Sarah. Just as the lack of it doesn't define your character. The meeting in Springfield was at a traditionalist club in the city. 3 local businessmen wanted to invest in a residential condominium project. Sarah observed them carefully during the presentation. The first, Dr. Anthony Walker, owned a chain of supermarkets, a soft-spoken man with calculated gestures. The second, engineer Charles Smith, came from a traditional family in the region and was interested in diversifying investments. The third, John Oliver, was the youngest, around 35 years old, and had made his fortune in agribusiness. So, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Walker said, our proposal is to invest $15 million in the project with a guaranteed return of 20% per year. Sarah discreetly noted, return very high for the current market, suspicious. David conducted the meeting professionally, but Sarah sensed that he was also suspicious. And what would be the counterpart from Johnson Enterprises? David asked. You bring the experience, the contacts, the brand, John Oliver replied. We bring the capital. Interesting, David said, but I will need to analyze the proposal carefully. During lunch, Sarah had the opportunity to observe the 3 men interacting. There was something unsaid, a tension she couldn't identify. David, she whispered when he got up to take a call. There's something wrong here. What? They know each other very well. They know details about our company that aren't in public reports. And, she hesitated, John Oliver has a tattoo on his wrist that he tried to hide the whole time. What kind of tattoo? I couldn't see it clearly, but it looked like a snake. David frowned. Let's go. The drive back was tense. David made several calls, asking for information about the 3 businessmen. Sarah, he said after a particularly long call, you were right. John Oliver has connections to money laundering, and the tattoo you saw is a symbol of a faction. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They wanted to use our company for laundering. Probably. Once again, your intuition saved me from a serious problem. When they arrived in Chicago, it was already night. David insisted on dropping Sarah off at home and going up to get to know the apartment better. Ethan was doing homework at the living room table when they arrived. He ran to hug his mother. Mom, how was the trip? Good, love. Did you behave? Yes. Aunt Carol made lasagna for dinner and saved some for you. David watched the interaction between mother and son with a nostalgic smile. Ethan noticed him and approached. Hi, Uncle David. Want to see my room? Sarah was about to protest, but David was already being dragged by the boy. Ethan proudly showed off his few toys, the new bed, and especially his collection of soccer stickers. This one is from Pelé. Ethan showed an old sticker. Aunt Carol gave it to me. She said he was the best player in the world. And she was right. David sat on the bed examining the sticker. Do you like soccer? I love it. I want to be a player when I grow up. Mum said if I study hard, I can join a soccer school next year. David looked at Sarah, who was watching from the door. What position do you play? Forward, just like Messi. They talked about soccer for 20 minutes. Sarah watched how patient David was with Ethan, how he answered his questions seriously, treating him like a little adult. Ethan, Sarah. Finally, David intervened. Time for a bath. School tomorrow. Ethan obeyed, but not before making David promise he would come back to see his other treasures. I'm sorry, Sarah said when they were alone in the living room. He doesn't have much male contact. No need to apologize. He's an amazing boy. David looked around the simple but cozy room. You've made a home here. I tried. It still doesn't feel ours. It will feel like it. David headed for the door. Sarah, thank you for today. Once again, you protected me from a mess. I was just doing my job. David paused at the door, turning to face her. No, Sarah. You were looking out for me, and that's very different. After he left, Sarah stood by the window for a long time, watching the city lights. For the first time since she started working at Johnson Enterprises, she wondered if her feelings for David were crossing professional boundaries. In the bathtub, Ethan shouted, "Mom, Uncle David is cool. He knows everything about soccer." Sarah smiled, but her heart was confused. David was becoming too important in their lives, and that scared her more than any corporate conspiracy. That night, while Ethan slept peacefully in his new bed, Sarah stayed awake, thinking about how to protect her heart without losing the trust she had worked so hard to build. Autumn was coming to an end in Chicago when Sarah received a call that would change everything. It was a rainy Thursday in May, and she was organizing documents for a board meeting when her cell phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello? Sarah Johnson?" The male voice was unfamiliar, with a slight northeastern accent. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Carlos Henry Smith. I'm a lawyer. I need to speak with you about your son, Ethan." Sarah's world stopped. "About Ethan? What is this about?" "I'd prefer not to discuss it over the phone. Can I meet you this afternoon?" "It's about the child's father." Sarah felt her legs weaken. For 8 years, she had managed to keep that ghost from the past far away from their lives. "Ethan's father doesn't exist for us. Ms. Johnson, I understand your position, but my client has legal rights, and frankly, it would be better if we talked amicably before this turns into a lawsuit." 2 hours later, Sarah was sitting in a cafe near the office, watching a man in his 40s with grey hair and a simple suit. Dr. Carlos Henry looked like someone who had been fighting for difficult causes for a long time. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he said, ordering a plain coffee. "I'll be direct. My client is Ryan Smith." Sarah paled. Ryan, the soccer player who had abandoned her when he found out about the pregnancy, the man who had promised to take care of her and the baby but had disappeared when the offers from big clubs started coming in. "He has no rights over my son," Sarah said firmly. "Legally, he does. Ryan never renounced his paternity. He just disappeared." Dr. Carlos stirred the sugar in his coffee slowly. "But he has changed, Sarah. Can I call you Sarah? I prefer Ms. Johnson." "Ms. Johnson, Ryan is now the coach of the Chicago Fire. He's married, has a stable life, and he wants to meet his son." Sarah laughed bitterly. 8 years later, how convenient. He told me about you two, about how young and immature he was when he found out about the pregnancy, about how he regretted his decision all these years. Dr. Carlos, I'll be clear. Ethan doesn't know who his father is. For him, it's just the two of us, and he's happy that way. Doctor, Carlos took a folder out of his briefcase. "Sarah, my client is willing to be generous. Back child support, private school, health insurance, everything the child needs. In exchange for what? Recognition of paternity and visitation rights." Sarah stood up abruptly. "No. Ms. Johnson, with all due respect, you live in a rented apartment. You work to support the child. Ryan can offer a future that you will never be able to provide." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. "Get out of here. Think about the child's well-being." "I only think about my son's well-being," Sarah shouted, causing other people in the cafe to look over. "Ethan is happy, healthy, loved. That is worth more than all the money in the world." Dr. Carlos remained calm. "Ms. Johnson, if you do not accept an amicable solution, my client will file a paternity recognition action and request joint custody. And frankly, courts tend to favor the father who can provide better financial conditions." Sarah left the cafe with trembling legs. She went up to the office in shock, trying to process what had happened. "Sarah," Jessica noticed her expression. "Are you okay?" "I am. I just need to talk to Mr. David." David received her immediately. One look was enough for him to realize that something was drastically wrong. "What happened?" Sarah told him everything, from the call to the conversation with the lawyer. David listened in silence, his expression growing more serious. "Sarah, is this Ryan really Ethan's biological father?" "Yes," Sarah replied quietly. "But he never wanted to be a real father. He abandoned me when he found out I was pregnant." David stood up, walking to the window. "And now he wants to come back." "David, I can't lose my son." Sarah's voice broke. "Ethan is everything I have in life." David turned to look at her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before, a deep, personal pain. "Sarah, I know exactly what you're feeling." "How?" David took a deep breath. "Because I went through the same thing. My ex-wife used Jake against me throughout the divorce process. In the end, she managed to get me to lose full custody." Sarah stepped closer. "I didn't know it was that serious. She claimed I was a workaholic, that I didn't have time to be a proper father, and—" David hesitated, "that I had depressive tendencies after my mother's death. Is that true? The depression? Yes. My mother died in a car accident when Jake was 10. I went through a very difficult phase, but I have never stopped loving my son or wanting to take care of him." Sarah lightly touched his arm. "I'm so sorry. What I mean is, we won't let this happen to you and Ethan." "How?" David turned to face her completely. "Sarah, I'm going to hire the best family lawyers in the country to defend you, and I will use all my influence to ensure that this Ryan does not take Ethan away from you." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" David was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more vulnerable. "Because you and Ethan have become important to me. Very important." That night, Sarah came home pretending everything was normal. Ethan was on the couch watching cartoons, still in his school uniform. "Hi, sweetheart. How was school?" "Good. We played soccer at recess and I scored 3 goals. Ethan ran to hug her. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Sarah's heart raced. "Of course, sweetheart." "Why don't I have a dad?" Sarah felt the world spin. "Why are you asking this?" "The boys at school were talking about their dads. Some have dads, others don't." I wanted to understand. Sarah knelt in front of her son, holding his small hands. "Ethan, you do have a dad. It's me." "But Mom is Mom, right?" "Sometimes when someone loves very much, it can be both things." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Some dads leave before babies are born, not because the baby isn't special, but because they aren't ready to be dads." Ethan thought seriously. "And then do they get ready?" "Sometimes. But sometimes it's too late." "Is it too late for my dad?" Sarah hugged her son tightly, trying to hide her tears. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I know that you are loved. Very, very loved." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah stayed on the apartment balcony, looking at the few stars visible in the polluted Chicago sky. Her phone rang. "How are you?" It was David. "Confused. Scared. That's normal. But Sarah, I want you to know that you won't face this alone." "David." Sarah hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you still hope to regain custody of your son?" David was silent for so long that Sarah thought the call had dropped. "Every day," he finally said. "Every single day. And what if this lawyer is right? If the courts really favor those with more money? Then we'll make sure you have the resources you need to fight." "How?" "Trust me, Sarah. Just trust me." After they hung up, Sarah thought about how her life had completely changed in less than 6 months. From a night cleaner on the outskirts to an executive assistant in downtown Chicago. From an invisible woman to someone who mattered to one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. But above all, she thought about how David had looked at her that afternoon, not as an employee, not as a protégé, but as a woman for whom he had developed real feelings. And for the first time, Sarah admitted to herself that she also felt something for him, something deep, frightening, and completely complicated. While the city slept outside, Sarah stayed awake, knowing that the coming days would define not only Ethan's future, but the direction her relationship with David would take. The heart and reason waged a silent battle within her, and Sarah didn't know which one would emerge victorious. The bombshell dropped on a Monday morning when Sarah least expected it. She was in the office reviewing contracts when Jessica appeared with a grim expression. "Sarah, there are journalists in the reception. They want to talk to you." "Journalists? About what?" "Something about your personal life. David sent word for you not to go down under any circumstances." Sarah rushed to the window. Down below, on the sidewalk in front of the building, there were 3 TV vans and at least 10 journalists with cameras. Her stomach churned. David appeared in the office with a tense look on his face. "Sarah, we need to talk. Now." They headed to the reserved meeting room. David closed the door and lowered the blinds. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, feeling panic rise in her chest. David turned on the TV on the wall. A morning gossip show was on the air, and Sarah felt the world collapse when she saw her own picture on the screen. "The mysterious woman who has captured the heart and business of businessman David Johnson," the host said. Sarah Johnson, 32, a single mother who worked as a cleaner before becoming the trusted assistant of the millionaire. The images alternated between photos of Sarah entering the building, old footage of her in uniform leaving her night job, and even pictures of Ethan playing in the park near the apartment. "How did they get these photos?" Sarah whispered, horrified. "It gets worse." David turned up the volume. "Sources close to the family reveal that Sarah Johnson has a dark past. The father of her child is none other than the current coach of the Chicago Fire, Ryan Smith, who is now fighting for custody of the child." Sarah let herself fall into a chair. "Oh my God! Ethan, he's at school." David was already typing on his phone. "I'm sending our security to pick up Ethan now. He will be safe." "But the revelations don't stop there," the host continued. "Sources say that Sarah Johnson was instrumental in the removal of Camilla Johnson from the family business, using privileged information obtained through her closeness to the president." The segment continued for another 10 devastating minutes. They showed photos of Sarah and David leaving the office together, insinuated a secret romance, questioned the speed of her promotion, and painted a picture of an opportunistic woman who had seduced a vulnerable businessman. "Who did this?" Sarah asked, her hands trembling. "I have my suspicions," David said grimly. "Camilla has contacts in the media, and this timing, right after the lawyer's approach." Sarah's phone rang. It was Carol. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? There's someone filming the door of our building. Miss Carol, are you all right?" "I am, but I'm worried." "What is this story they're talking about on TV?" Sarah quickly explained the situation. Carol listened in silence. "Honey, do you want me to go get Ethan?" "No need. They've already sent someone to get him, but thank you." "Sarah," Carol's voice turned serious, "are you sure about what you're doing? This world of the wealthy is dangerous." After hanging up, Sarah turned to David. "I need to get out of here. I need to see my son." "Sarah, outside is filled with journalists. It's not safe." "I don't care. Ethan must be scared, not understanding what's happening." David watched her for a moment, seeing the maternal determination overpower her fear. "Then let's go out the back. My car is in the garage." 20 minutes later, they were at Sarah's apartment. Ethan was there, playing video games with the security guard, seemingly oblivious to the chaos outside. "Mom!" Ethan ran into her arms. "Why did you come early? And why are there so many people with cameras on the street?" Sarah knelt in front of her son, choosing her words carefully. "Ethan, sometimes people get curious about our lives. It's like when you see an accident on the street and want to know what happened. But we didn't have an accident." "No, sweetheart, but some people find our story interesting." Ethan looked at David. "Uncle David, is it true that you like my mom?" The silence in the room was deafening. David also knelt, meeting Ethan's gaze. "Ethan, your mom is a very special person. She's brave, smart, and an amazing mother. Anyone would be proud to have her as a friend. But do you like her as a boyfriend?" Sarah turned red. "Ethan, it's a fair question." David smiled sadly. "Ethan, I care a lot about your mom, but adult life is complicated sometimes." Sarah's phone rang. It was Dr. Anthony Walker, Rodrigo's lawyer. "Ms. Johnson, did you see the news?" "I did, and I imagine your client is loving the show." "Actually, no. Rodrigo is worried about the exposure of the boy. He didn't authorize this." Sarah frowned. "So who—" "Ms. Johnson, I need to be honest. Someone is playing very dirty in this story, and I think both you and my client are being manipulated." After hanging up, Sarah relayed the conversation to David. "Sarah," David said thoughtfully, "what if it's not a coincidence? What if someone is orchestrating all of this?" "What do you mean?" "Think. First, Rodrigo's lawyer shows up. Then information leaks to the press, just when you're gaining traction at the company." Sarah understood immediately. "Jessica. She found out about Ethan, about Rodrigo, and decided to use this to destabilize you. And me too." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah and David sat on the small balcony of the apartment. The movement of journalists had decreased, but there were still a few cars parked on the street. "David," Sarah said softly, "maybe it's better if I step back. From the company, from you. It's bringing too many problems." David turned to look at her. "Is that what you want? I want to protect my son, and I don't want your reputation to be harmed because of me." "Sarah," David took her hand, "can I tell you something?" She nodded. "In the last 2 years since the divorce, I became a bitter person. I worked 16 hours a day because I couldn't stand going home to an empty house. I didn't trust anyone. I didn't allow myself to feel anything." Sarah listened in silence. "Until you came into my life," David continued. "You reminded me that there are genuine people in the world, that it's still worth believing in the goodness of people." "David—" "No," he gently interrupted her. "Let me finish. You have become much more than an employee to me. You have become essential." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "But we come from different worlds." "Different worlds, same values," David said. "Sarah, I fell in love with you, with your strength, your integrity, and the way you love your son." "I did too," Sarah whispered. "I fell in love with you, but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Of not being enough. Of Ethan getting used to you and then you leaving, of getting hurt again." David leaned closer, gently touching her face. "Sarah, I can't promise it will be easy. We have huge obstacles ahead, but I can promise that I will fight for us. For you, for Ethan, for this family we can build together." In that moment, under the few visible stars in the Chicago sky, Sarah made the most important decision of her life. "I will fight too," she said, "but I need you to understand. Ethan comes first, always." "I wouldn't expect anything different," David smiled. "In fact, it's one of the things I love most about you." They kissed for the first time, softly, while the city buzzed with speculation about them below. It was a kiss full of promises, fears, hopes, and the certainty that their lives had changed forever. When they parted, Sarah rested her forehead against his. "What are we going to do now?" "Now," David said determinedly, "we're going to show everyone what we're made of. You, me, and Ethan, together." 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in the bedroom she now shared with David in a cozy house in Lincoln Park. Her hair was styled in an elegant bun, and she wore a navy blazer that David had chosen especially for that day. It was her first official meeting as a minority partner at Johnson Enterprises. "Mom!" Ethan came running in, wearing the uniform of his new private school. "Uncle David said I can go train with the youth team of the Chicago Fire today." Sarah smiled, adjusting her son's tie. And do you remember what we talked about regarding your studies? Yes. First homework, then soccer. Ethan hugged her tightly. Mom, are you nervous? A little bit. It's an important day at work. You're going to crush it. You always do. David appeared at the door, impeccable in his grey suit. David watched the scene with a smile. Over those months, he had become the father Ethan never had, patient, present, genuinely interested in every detail of the boy's life. Ready? He asked, kissing Sarah's forehead. Ready, Sarah replied, grabbing her briefcase. The commute to the office was smooth. The media storm had passed after 3 intense weeks. The truth had been revealed. Jessica had indeed orchestrated the leak of the information in a last desperate attempt to destabilize David. Ryan, surprisingly, had proven to be an unexpected ally, publicly clarifying that he did not wish to disturb Ethan's life and that he only wanted to establish a gradual and respectful relationship with his son. Sarah, David said during the ride, I want you to know that today is not about you proving anything to anyone. You've already proven your competence dozens of times. I know, Sarah smiled, but it's still strange to think that a former cleaner will be introduced as a partner of one of the largest real estate firms in Chicago. A former cleaner who saved the company from bankruptcy, uncovered a family conspiracy, and has a natural talent for business, David corrected. Titles do not define character, Sarah. You taught me that. The board meeting was a milestone. Sarah presented her company's social responsibility project, a program that offered vocational training for residents of underprivileged communities, creating job opportunities in the construction industry itself. The pilot project would be implemented in the East Side Housing Project, Sarah explained to the 10 directors present, where I grew up and know the community's needs. The goal is to empower 200 people in the first year. Dr. Yamamoto, who had become one of Sarah's biggest supporters after learning her story, spoke up. Sarah, besides the social aspect, what would be the financial return for the company? Excellent question, Sarah replied, with the confidence she had developed over the months. First, we would have local specialized labor, reducing transportation costs and increasing productivity. Second, we gain credibility with public agencies, facilitating project approvals. And third, we build a brand associated with social responsibility, an important differentiator in today's market. The presentation lasted an hour. In the end, the approval was unanimous. Sarah, said Helena Carvalho, the lawyer who had initially supported Jessica, your numbers are impressive, and your strategic vision is exactly what the market needs today. Indeed, after the meeting, Sarah and David had lunch at the same cafe where she had met Ryan's lawyer months earlier. The difference was striking. Now she was confident, professionally fulfilled, but most importantly, happy. Are you proud? David asked, watching her savor the shrimp risotto. I am, but do you know what else I'm proud of? What? That I've kept my essence. I still live in a simple house. I still visit Ms. Carroll every week. I still take Ethan to play soccer in the park. Sarah smiled. Money and position haven't changed who I am inside. And that's exactly why I love you, David said simply. That afternoon they picked up Ethan from his new school. The boy ran into their arms, beaming. How was practice? Sarah asked. Amazing. The coach said I have natural talent. Ethan turned to David. Dad, did you see how I kicked? Sarah and David exchanged emotional glances. It had been 2 months since Ethan had started calling David Dad, naturally, without anyone pressuring him. I did, champ. You're getting better and better. During dinner at home, Ethan made an important announcement. Dad, Mom, I have a surprise. What surprise? Sarah asked. Ethan ran to his room and returned with a colorful piece of paper. I drew a picture of our family. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a house, Sarah in the middle, David on one side, and Ethan on the other. In the corner, he had written in childish handwriting, My family that I love very much. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. David wrapped his arm around her. "It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen in my life," David said, visibly moved. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah and David sat in the small garden of their house, gazing at the stars. "David," Sarah said, "can I ask you a question?" "Always." "Do you miss the life you had before? The luxury, the parties, that world?" David reflected for a moment. "Sarah, I had a 500-square-meter penthouse in Gold Coast, designer furniture, expensive artwork, a garage with 3 imported cars." He took her hand. "But I was deeply unhappy, alone, bitter, without a real purpose. And now? Now I have a simple house in Lincoln Park, a garden where Ethan plays soccer, a woman I truly love, and a son who calls me Dad." David smiled. "I'm the richest man in the world." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we will work out? Really? Sarah, look at everything we've faced together so far. Family conspiracy, media exposure, legal battles, social pressures." David kissed the top of her head. "If we've survived all that and only got stronger, I think we can face anything." "You're right," Sarah smiled. "And do you know what I've discovered in these months?" "What?" "That true love is not about becoming the person the other wants. It's about finding someone who loves you exactly as you are and inspires you to be the best version of yourself." David turned to look at her completely. "Sarah Johnson, will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am." No ring, no knees on the ground, no big productions. Just a passionate man asking the woman of his life to build a future together. Sarah felt tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I accept." They kissed under the starry sky of Chicago, while the city lights witnessed yet another chapter of a story that had begun with a simple job interview. It would turn into a journey of love, growth, and discovery. From Ethan's room came an ecstatic shout, "Yay! You're getting married!" They laughed, running to the room where they found Ethan standing on the bed, having obviously overheard the conversation. "Can I be the best man?" Ethan asked, hugging both of them. "You'll be much more than a best man," David said. "You'll be my son, officially." And there, in that perfect moment, with Ethan between them, Sarah knew she had found not only the love of her life, but the family she had always dreamed of having. 2 years later, Sarah was looking out the window of her new office, now as a full partner at Johnson Enterprises, and saw the first group of young people from the East Side Housing Project graduating from the training program. Among them was Carol, who at 69 had decided to learn basic computer skills. The project had expanded to 5 communities, creating over 500 direct jobs. Sarah had become a national reference in corporate social responsibility, giving lectures at universities and companies on how to include vulnerable communities in the formal market. David entered the office carrying 2 coffees and a stylish envelope. "It's here," he said, handing her the envelope. Sarah opened it nervously. It was the result of the adoption process. David was officially becoming Ethan's legal father. "Now we're a complete family," David said, kissing her. "We always were," Sarah smiled. "We just needed the paper to confirm it." That afternoon, they went to pick up Ethan from school to share the news. The boy, now 10 years old and a member of the Chicago Fire youth team, reacted with the maturity he had developed during those transformative years. "So, does that mean you can't ever separate again?" Ethan asked seriously. "Never again," David confirmed. "Great," Ethan smiled, "because I was thinking, when you have more kids, can I teach them soccer?" Sarah and David exchanged smiles. Some dreams really do come true, and sometimes they are even better than we imagined.